Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Allison and this is episode 11 of the Knitting Podcast. Today's actually going to be a little bit of a quicker update. I have one finished object and a couple of whips to share. I've been pretty loyal to the knits that I'm working on lately and haven't cast on too much, which is good. Definitely something that I said I wanted to do. I've been tempted to cast some other stuff on. I think we are still at the tail end of summer. Like it's quite hot today still here in Montreal, but we've been flirting a little bit with the cooler weather. And anytime I get to break out one of my sweaters, I get really excited for fall knitting. So as we sort of inch our way towards September, I know I'm going to be tempted to cast on more fall knits. That's just, the season. It's the time of year for knitting. But for now, I'm content to kind of continue with what I've got going on my needles. One of them in particular, I kind of wanted to have finished by the fall, so I'm trying to prioritize that one a little bit. But anyway, I've been very good. I will jump right into my updates. I've definitely been having a busy summer, so I'm getting knitting in where I can in the evenings and stuff, but I'm trying to enjoy, the last couple weeks of summer. Got a lot going on right now in my life and, spending time with friends and families. I have a couple of races coming up this fall, a 5K and a 10K. Usually I have a fall half marathon lined up. This will be my first year in quite a while that I don't have a half marathon that I'm registered for, obviously with the exception of 2020, 2021. We don't talk about that. But yeah, this year I kind of just wanted to take it a little bit easier. So I signed up for a 5K and a 10K. They're a week apart, but it should be fun. I typically enjoy running kind of the shorter distances. I've done one marathon. I'd like to ideally in the future run another one, but I think that's a ways off. Anyway, I won't go on a whole tangent right now about running, but it is another big passion of mine, aside from knitting, of course. But yeah, so lots of time being spent outside right now. Not as much time being spent with my yarn, but that's okay. I know that once the temperatures drop, I'm going to be inside on this couch knitting away. So for my first and only finished object today, I have something that debuted on my last podcast episode, and that is the Storm Sweater Baby by PetiteKnit. It is finished. I knit this in, I believe, the 3 to 6 month size. This is for a friend of mine who is due to give birth to her son in a couple months now, but her baby shower is this weekend. So I have had this finished for quite some time now. I wanted to just make sure that it was ready for the date, even though he won't be here for a little while, so I do have time. But I wanted to be able to gift this to her with the rest of my gift. This is a very popular pattern. I'm sure many of you have seen it before. Essentially, it is made up of these kind of chunky rows of purl and knit details. So all of the texture on this sweater is created just using purl stitches and knit stitches. There are no cables, there are no faux cables, no lace, anything like that. So it is a really great beginner friendly, or just kind of like if you want something that's a little bit more mindless to work on, this is a great option. And you're definitely kept on your toes with all of these different sections being only, a couple centimeters long, and then you're jumping to the next one. So it is very potato chippy in that way. You really eagerly want to just get to the next section. I mentioned in my last podcast episode that I was having some issues for some reason with this section up here. For like whatever reason, I just kept miscounting my stitches and having to take back and redo. Thankfully, there are no mistakes in this. I was pretty diligent with going back and making sure everything was correct. And when it came to the sleeves, it really was not an issue. I think maybe the day I was working on this part I was just having an off day with my knitting. But yeah, this is knit out of KnitPicks Stroll, which is a sock yarn. And I made this in the color Aurora Heather. The pattern suggested that I would need 3 balls of the Stroll to complete the 3 to 6 month size. I used less than 2. So I have a whole ball and a bit left over. You can actually see the little bit right here. So I have this plus 1 whole ball left over, which is a lot more than I expected to have left over, but I know that PetiteKnit can sometimes overestimate her yarn yardage, which I would always rather than, an underestimation and then having to play yarn chicken. I do still have to weave this little end in before I wrap this today. But yeah, overall, a fairly quick knit considering that it is a baby size. It was an enjoyable knit. I really enjoyed working with the Stroll. This was my first time knitting like a full project in this yarn. It's great. It's got a great color range, very affordable from KnitPicks. This color I think is really beautiful, great for the fall. The only real modification that I made when it comes to this is, you might be able to tell, the neckline. PetiteKnit calls for a folded neckline, which is what I typically will do on any sweaters that I'm knitting. The issue that I ran into with this one was that I don't know if the pickup rate was maybe a little off in the pattern or I miscounted, but I found that this was looking a little small. And I was afraid that if I had knit more and folded it over, that if I did eventually need to go in and redo this, it would be more annoying because I've already gone through the process of knitting it longer, folding it over, and I thought that that might make it a little bit tighter even. So for now, I did just kind of the one layer, just bound it off as normal here, and it is still looking a little bit small to me, but before going in and making any modifications, I wanted to see if it would fit on him as is. If I don't need to make any modifications, then I won't. It's a little bit hard to know, of course, how big a baby's going to be when he comes out. He's due in October, so I figured wearing this sweater throughout the fall and winter, so he'll still be quite small. But if anything, I'm going to let my friend know that if this is too tight, it's a very easy fix for me to go in, undo it, and then reknit it. But otherwise, I think it looks really cute. And I do have another friend who has a baby who is expected in November. So I plan on knitting another sweater for that baby in the same yarn, but in a different color. So look forward to seeing that sometime soon. This is her second baby, so she won't be having a baby shower. So I have pretty much until November to get that ready for her. So it might be a little while before I start it. But yeah, that is my storm sweater baby. All right, moving into whips now. This is a new to the podcast project, but not a new to the podcast yarn. This is a yarn that I've has talked about on the podcast before. I picked it up at Knit City, Montreal back in May. Gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful yarn. I'll show it here. This is the Merino Yak sock from the yarn company Maya Part, who are a Quebec-based yarn brand. And this is a beautiful color. The shade is lilac. You can tell it's kind of like a semi-solid in that there is some very slight variegation. If the camera's not picking it up, then I will definitely add some photos. But yeah, beautiful hand-dyed yarn. I've never knit anything purple for myself, so very excited about this. Essentially, I had started the Diane cardigan by Cookie the Knitter and had some issues with the gauge. I was knitting this on vacation and didn't have other needle tips with me, so I was kind of just settling for what I had. Got home, realized that the project was way too small. I didn't think blocking was going to fix it, so I kind of scrapped it and decided to move on to a different project, which was the Sabai sweater by Susanne Muller. I know the Sabai top has been kind of everywhere this summer. I love the fit of it. I think it's a really beautiful top. It was definitely a contender for me this summer for what summer top I was going to knit. I typically usually only do one a year. So I ended up going with the Ivy top instead by PetiteKnit, which I talked about in my last episode. So instead, I thought that a good compromise would be to knit the Sabai sweater instead. So this is what I have for that. I have cast off the body. This was started like 2 weeks ago, so I kind of tore through this really quick. Again, it's just plain stockinette all the way through. So a quick, easy, mindless knit. I went on a little weekend getaway trip with my husband to celebrate our anniversary. So I brought this along and was really, chugging away at it. And I think that the yarn just looks absolutely gorgeous when knit up in this plain stockinette stitch. You can really see kind of the definition in the color, and the some areas where the color is a little deeper and some areas where it's a bit lighter. I just think it's a beautiful yarn and I'm super excited about this. This is also blocked and the drape is fantastic. This is a fingering weight yarn that I'm knitting up on 4mm needles. So the gauge is definitely a little bit loose, and because of that, I think it really just contributes to the gorgeous drape of this. So really excited to get going on the sleeves on this because I have a feeling I'm going to be wearing it a lot in the transitional periods from, end of summer into fall as the weather is getting cooler again. The only issue that I have with this, and I'm still kind of like trying to decide if it's a big issue and if it bothers me enough to take action on it, is because this is a hand-dyed yarn, I wanted to alternate my skeins just to avoid any kind of really dramatic color pooling. I did notice that one of the skeins looked a little lighter than the others, so in order to avoid, any unwanted color deposits in here, I was like, okay, I'm going to just alternate my skeins. I've alternated skeins once before with a hand-dyed yarn, but it was for my Monday sweater where my main color was just the same all the way through, and I was alternating skeins of the Surrey that I was holding with it. So in that case, all I was really doing was dropping the old Surrey, kind of twisting it around the new piece and carrying the new piece up and continuing. And because I still had that same consistent merino strand that was being held throughout the whole sweater, I didn't have to worry about any kind of gaps where I was switching over the yarn because I still had the majority. The thicker yarn piece that I was using, the fingering merino, was not being swapped out, if that makes any sense. So for this, I had tried that method a little bit, found that it was kind of leaving noticeable holes and bumps. So I sort of switched gears. This top part here is where I was doing that. And I think after blocking, it's really not too noticeable. I will say it is more noticeable on camera, which I guess, maybe a little concerning. But in real life, I don't notice it. I don't know that many other people who are not knitters would notice it. But when I got to knitting in the round, I wanted to try the yarn forward method, which I've never actually used before, but I've heard great things about. So that was what I did. I followed a couple of YouTube tutorials that I found. And one of the main draws to this method was that people were saying it doesn't leave a noticeable line where you are switching your skeins. But I would disagree. So this line right here, all down the middle back of the sweater, is where the beginning of round marker was, which is another thing. I'm used to my sweaters having the beginning of round marker under the arm. And I even thought about this while I was starting doing the yarn forward method. I was like, should I move the beginning of round to the underarm so that if something does happen, it's less noticeable because it's hiding under the arm? And ultimately, I didn't do that, obviously. And so that, that's on me for thinking about it and then saying, no, it's fine. But this is after blocking, and I'm still getting a pretty dramatic line here. It looks like the stitches right where the transition is happening are fairly tight because I was, pulling my yarn tight to make sure that there was, a seamless transition. But it's the few stitches right before, like the last few stitches of the row before I would drop and switch yarn colors, that are loose and like open, and it kind of leaves this weird line. So it's at the bottom of the back of the shirt where, I can't see it. Other people can see it, but I can't. And I'm trying to decide if it bothers me enough to rip this back and redo the whole thing, and definitely move the beginning of round to under the arm, but then also maybe try a new technique. If any of you have ever used the yarn forward technique and have had success, or have maybe, experienced the same thing as me, I would love to hear your experience and how you maybe resolved any issues that you were having with tension. it's, you know, very possibly, very probably a me problem in not managing my yarn tension properly when I was transitioning from one ball to the next. But it's definitely disappointing having knit, you know, this is probably about 15 centimeters of work that now I might go back in and redo. It's essentially from where I joined the arms. I might try and block it again, or maybe see if I can, you know, pull the loose stitches a little tighter and pull the tight stitches a little looser and sort of even out the gauge here, just using like a tapestry needle. But yeah, what I've decided right now is that I'm going to proceed to the sleeves, block it again, try it on, and then see how I feel once the project is all together. I don't like having kind of, you know, things on my project that make it look sloppy or, you know, not as neatly done. But it's also on the back, and I don't know if I would be bothered as much by it. I know, again, this is something other people see, but anyway, let me know what you would do. I'm going to take some time to mull it over. Otherwise, I am kind of in love with this project. I love the raw neckline. I think it turned out way neater than I expected, and I like how it sits on me. Just this single stitch here for the shoulder seam. I think it's a really beautiful, classy, simple design. And I'm excited to wear it to work, wear it in, you know, all situations. And again, the drape cannot be overstated. It's absolutely stunning. So really, really loving this yarn. So far loving the pattern. I wish the beginning of round was under the arm, but that's probably just because I'm used to working projects like that. And, you know, it's on me for not fiddling around with it to make it ideal for my situation. But yeah, that is my Sabai top. And like I said, it's knit up really quickly. So I imagine I'll probably be done this by like mid-September, maybe. So excited to have this in my wardrobe. The last whip I have, you've seen before many times. This is the Moby Sweater Man for my husband that I'm knitting. Designer is PetiteKnit. Another very, very popular pattern that I am sure many of you have seen before. I don't have too much more to say about this at this point, considering that, you know, from joining the underarms until the bottom, you're just doing the same thing over and over in the round, following the chart, the cable chart, which I've essentially memorized at this point, which is really nice. I only really need to double check whenever it comes time to cable, because I never remember how long this is supposed to be before you end up doing the cable. But yeah, I think it's turning out gorgeous. You can definitely see sort of a line here from the section that I've blocked versus what I have not yet blocked. The drape on the part that I blocked is really nice. The yarn definitely softened up a lot. It's looking a little more stiff toward the bottom, but I know from, you know, having used this yarn before and from the top of the sweater that that will soften up as well. The yarn, by the way, I did not mention, is KnitPicks palette in the color Hazelnut. And every time I talk about this yarn, I talk about how gorgeous it is. It's stunning. It's a beautiful chocolate brown color. It matches my nails right now pretty well. And like I said, this is for my husband. He is 6'3". He's got a long torso. So I will probably be working on this quite a bit more throughout the fall. This is the one that I really wanted to have done for the fall, winter time, so that he can get some wear out of it. I started this in February. Of course, there was no rush to really finish this during the summer, but now I don't want him to have to wait a whole other season to wear it. So even though he's tall and it's a lot of knitting, I'm trying to prioritize this as best as I can. And yeah, this is what I have so far. I imagine it'll probably be another, like, I don't know, foot on the body before I can start the ribbing and bind off. And he's also got really long arms. So in the past, I've knit him the Hazelnut sweater by PetiteKnit, and I did have to modify the length of the body and arms on that one. So I anticipate the same thing happening here for the Moby, but that is okay. I committed to this and I will see it through. And I told myself I'm not going to start another cabled project until this is done. And there's a cable project I really want to start that I've been talking about forever. So I will try to prioritize this so that I can get started on that one. But yeah, so far really loving how this is turning out. Every time I hold it up and look at it, I'm sort of blown away by the fact that I did that and I made that out of a piece of string, or 2 pieces of string rather, because I'm holding 2 balls together. Yeah, definitely recommend palette, definitely recommend the pattern. Obviously it's extremely well written and can't wait to see what this is going to look like all done. As far as acquisitions and plans, I am starting to think into the future about my fall knitting plans. I do plan on putting out a whole dedicated video to my fall knitting plans, so I won't dive too much into it right now. Acquisitions, I've been very good at not purchasing yarn. I have a lot of yarn already, and like I said, I've been quite loyal to these projects, so I haven't felt the need to go out and purchase more yarn. That said, I, like many other people, did purchase yarn from Knitting for Olive back on August 9th. They were doing a fundraiser where all of their profits from that one day were being donated to UNICEF to help in their efforts in Gaza. So I decided to make a purchase from Knitting for Olive. It had been a while since I had purchased from Knitting for Olive, but I thought this was, as good a reason as any to do so. And I picked up this beautiful combination here. I got 6 balls of the Merino and 6 balls of the soft silk mohair, both in the color Claret, which is a color that I've had my eye on for years now, genuinely. It was my first kind of like favorite color from Knitting for Olive whenever I would go and scan on their website, back before I could really afford to splurge on Knitting for Olive yarn. And so I'm really excited to finally own these colors. I have 6 balls of each, which should be enough for a sweater for myself. I am heavily leaning towards one, which is the Charlie pullover by Merino Knit. It is a, all over stockinette sweater, but it has a really nice collar detail, which I love. I'm currently working on the Paul cardigan by the same designer. I haven't had progress on it since my last update, so it's not included in this video, but I've raved before about how well written the pattern is and how great I think the pattern and the designer are. So absolutely happy to support the designer and knit another one of their patterns. And I think it's going to look stunning in this red color. I've actually seen a few people who've knit that exact pattern with this exact yarn in this color. So really, really excited about that. I think this red is just absolutely gorgeous. It's sort of like a cooler toned berry red. And I think it'll be great for fall. It's, similar enough to a lot of the reds that I've knit with, but definitely different enough as well. It's kind of a, a unique color for my knitted wardrobe. So I'm really excited about that, and that'll definitely be a priority in my fall knitting. And that is all I have today. Like I said, it's a little bit of a quicker update. Hopefully by the next time I can have a lot more progress on these, and maybe I'll get started on the sleeves on that Paul cardigan I was talking about. I'd love to have one other finished object by the next time I update, but right now we're getting toward like sleeves on all of these 3 projects. Of course, the Moby, I still have a bit of the body left, but the Sabai sweater and the Paul cardigan are just finished body with no sleeves. So I do have to dive into those sleeves eventually and bite the bullet, but that is an issue for another day. Thank you so, so much for tuning in to this quick update. Once again, as always, I really appreciate the support, and whenever people tune into my videos, it blows me away. It warms my heart. So thank you so much for giving me your time, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.